And then eventually from there, once you kind of understand that a little better, then you can start moving into local development. Ask him to hook up on a local computer, and then you can you have a staging site on your nose, and then you have a live site. Normally what you do is you have two different setups. What you guys do is called like cowboy code.
Love it.
Exactly.
I think this is
it works the worst. All the time, something that I've had so many like heart crushing moments. You're like, they don't know how to. Good luck moving things over. See, you have to be careful. You don't want to keep yourself more than you need. It's just, two little wins here and there, but at the same time, creative portfolio comes into it. That's the thing you work on.
So I got a paddleboard summer last year, and I got my daughter on it. You know Jupiter Inlet, the lighthouse? I just knew it was the inlet, more paddleboard. So I go early in the morning, so we're there at 7:30, and right in the canal, it goes out to 150 feet, and it just drops the boats. So we're right along that area. Like, she knows what it is. I watch a cartoon called Sarah and it's called Sea Cows. I'm like, that's a sea cow, that's the thing. I think what's scary is she wasn't expecting it. And it's just all you see is the nostrils and the crowd. That was very cool.
Some places will just take wins and they'll say like, have you like print out like SQL queries and stuff like that, real basic stuff. So that's like more the back end thing. And then like, I'm like, what you like, right?
But we have done a bunch of swim lessons.
From where you're at right now, it's just
more confidence. I think I can get her back on.
And then basically from there, you kind of are able to take on more responsibility. That's the thing. It's scary when you're taking these jumps, but trust me, you'll get through it. Like I said, spend the time and have your resources. So when you're doing all these tutorials and doing all these mistakes and code things, so you're going to be using it.
When the boats come on,
online called the
breaks out next week.
What a great focus to like the inlet. I just learned that 100 feet out. There's so much to remember. Oh, like literally, just wherever you want to store it. For me, it's like, you know, chest its own search function. That's very simple. It has really simple notes. And it's hooked up to GitHub, which is something that a lot of people use.
So we got away from the actual stage way over there. Right.
Oh yeah. If you want, especially if you want to get into like actual
maybe a half month stuff. Even when the boats come out pretty fast.
Yeah, it's kind of like
absolutely.
The more you know, I would start.
That's like, taking the training wheels off and just, hey, here you go, ride a bike.
Basically, if I don't do that with her, like she won't do anything. So it's like we were just in Disney with Animal Kingdom over the weekend, and they have like this little dino park where they like actually go down to the next slides and climb on stuff and whatnot. She wouldn't go down any of the slides, so I threw her down one. It's fine, look at all the like it's doing it. I don't want to. Like, you're coming with me, so I go down with her.
It's the funnest thing ever,
Definitely nature on that one. Like my wife and I are different. She'll like, I don't want to say panic, but she'll like get into it, you know, and you feel sad. She's like, I get that. But like, at the same time, like that, it's not so bad. Yeah.
Tough love. Here you go. You're gonna be better for it.
I'm gonna sound like 90.
Yeah. Hello. Good. Nice to talk with you. All right. You're in the right spot. Yeah, save the yeah, we call on that. I don't believe I'm Chris. Have you been in the field for a while?
Full time a couple of years. I have dabbled in it
Okay, yeah. Yeah, this is actually the first job I've had. Haven't seen this guy in a while. How you doing?
Go to Palm Beach stuff.
What's going on?
Not a lot. Yeah, I'm getting a lot at the same time. You know, just so much work and
So you were telling us it's been a long time this has been a job?
In collaboration.
Yeah, so this is my first professional job in web development, but it's been over a year now. So, yeah. PGA. Yeah, super cool crew over there, lots of new technology.
Yeah.
A lot of
The organization we
way into
stuff that I'm working on.
stuff out back and forth, so it's been really fun.
The recruiter that you saw BocaJS wanted to see, I don't know if he was about you, the young guy, tall guy.
Computer like
So you mean Jason? Is that who? He does work there, but and actually, funny enough, he was the person who did my technical interview.
Yes.
But originally, I got reached out from one of the project managers. But yeah, I definitely lucked out.
I saw a lot of things being changed. I don't know who started it, but there's a lot of changes in there.
So today we're doing is going to do the generic.
Oh yeah,
Things in a technical way they weren't before.
Because
Pretty big revolution.
big time. It's still going on. There's a lot happening. Shuffling some feathers, but yeah, it's definitely.
Tall it is. It's if you're an Angular or React person, like I wouldn't really. It's
Why don't you remind me?
There you go.
That's all I'm using. There's a couple of
I know there's
aspects to it,
but
but I might. So React RX.
I don't know if there are cups over there though.
Redux. It more closely resembles Redux than
I was looking for some.
It's an enhancement of JavaScript, right? I write .NET. I was actually really
High school teacher, so definitely a big change in pace, but definitely.
and that leads to me very much like where you
I taught history
style on your screen.
So yeah, nothing's related at all.
Right, just like regular JavaScript, it does this thing. And I have a couple of
change, but I did
make things reactive with it.
programs that they have now. So I was able to learn. It's very
It's built itself, the person started very purposely picked me because it compiles a framework language, right? So you can just see how the world. You React resources, and then there's not necessary.
Oh, really? Yeah, I've heard of worlds.
Very bare bones. I like it. Just enough framework to see some damage.
Yeah, that's a really good program though here out of San Francisco, right? Yeah.
lectures and people helping those that weren't like super high level. They would sometimes we would graduate from cohort before. But everything they did was pair programming and working as a team. So it made you. This seems like our job is now. You get thrown into this situation, told the whole thing that doesn't thing. And you just have to to get off the mission first.
Right.
While getting along, they'll go.
And then eventually they get
And
one day.
that's totally what happened.
A lot of these things. I don't get it. Working with
Yeah,
all the
that's the one way to
I have no idea what's going on.
well.
Yeah, things start
Teaching you how to learn.
Yeah. There's a lot of technology to like that, you know? And then after that,
And then all the fundamentals there, that is not one thing I've seen in technical review, always touched on and
Right.
covered everything.
That's awesome. Did they have a particular stack of technologies?
Yeah, all JavaScript.
Okay,
So
yeah.
they're on the back
not do
end,
it.
and,
It's
they're everything.
You don't realize the limitations are until you start thinking
Oh, wow.
it's like when we first started going like old jobs.
I'll leave some back, I went through how
Oh, the original.
Yeah,
they do. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's always good to have comparison. You learn that much better. But yeah, there's lots of
Certainly, my first job, I had to swap out the forms
Oh, I mean,
I think the most important thing was like I felt confident building stuff. I learned a lot. Stack on the front end, and it's like you go through and all this stuff. But then the difference is not only like you said, like oh here's this other thing I want you to learn too. By the way, and like kind of
well, I mean, 7, yes.
Also like working with like fully finished products already, and you're kind of like, hey, can you add this feature? And so you're kind of like, oh, well, this is what's in AWS, and this is all like learning kind of like the components and how they connect to one another. I think that was
The speech is going to go down.
More or less.
Oh my goodness.
Start with, we have a different project every couple of days. And then have an application that just wasn't finished. But that had
Some firmware?
Just keep what's up.
okay.
No, it's going to be trying to process fast.
Yeah, we serve that.
Got it all done. There was like a bonus thing you could try.
Everything I want to see.
Oh wow.
I'm turning the team towards the wall.
A little bit.
I don't know if it moves.
First time I had to do something in a big industrial type code base. It was.
Wow.
We spent 4 hours just making a button.
Exactly. It's like I'm supposed to like you go to start it and it's like oh you don't have this environment or something. It's like I did that, you know, with stuff that's that much more. But yeah.
So they go like 7:45.
Yeah, I don't expect
Yeah,
to
I'm
see
just
it.
like, yeah.
I mean, I'm gonna just try this formula, see how it works. Like, I have a basic idea of what I'm about to do.
PGA we use almost
Did you just connect?
maps.
That's it? Nice.
So that was a big shift. Although they kind of won me over because in a way it just was that much easier.
Thank you.
A lot of stuff. Now I go back to like try and work on some stuff on my computer and I was like, it took me like an evening just to get, you know, like Ruby on Rails set up one time. And I'm like,
All right, everybody. How's everyone doing today? 7 o'clock. I figured we get started. If you guys want to migrate over, I'm going to try a different formula today. We got a couple of long-time patrons over here. The typical format is I have a speaker come talk about any general topic, and I got tired of looking for people to come talk, so I have a bunch of projects that I'm working on. Has anyone here heard of Code Palm Beach or not heard of Code Palm Beach? Not heard of Code Palm Beach. Well, Code Palm Beach is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to teaching kids to code. I am currently sitting as the vice chair on the board, and I'm building a bunch of little tools to help teach kids to code HTML and CSS. The biggest problem I see, the project we're going to work on today, is solving a problem. We're dealing with the iPad generation. Like kids interact with a keyboard, Cool? Yeah. There are volume buttons. So kids typically interact with like one dimension of the keyboard, but when dealing with code, you need special syntax. You need curly brackets, you know, open and close carets, and other semicolons, and other things of that nature. So as we were teaching these things, doing live events every Saturday, we noticed all the kids were struggling, like doing the finger pecking, like trying to figure out where they'll hit shift and then the comma, not realizing they need to hold it and then hit it to get the caret and other things like that.
Yeah, because a lot of them use like you know, iPads and that's it. Like
Yeah.
they don't use keyboards like at this point. It's you see like the generational gap where you're just like, oh no, like people are not using desktops anymore.
And has anyone used free CodeCamp at all? Okay, so I have a second tool called the Cosmic Checker. I should prefix this. I have a company called Cosmic Strawberry, and any project I build is Cosmic something, and I'm super creative. So it's Checker and Typer. Checker is essentially free CodeCamp, but locally. The other problem I see a lot of is people who finish free CodeCamp go like, all right, cool, I understand HTML and CSS. What do I do now? I'm like, well, create a .html file and a .css, link them up, and I've already lost them. Like, what is a folder system? What is a folder structure and all that good stuff? So Cosmic Typer Checker is to get them into VS Code as quickly as possible. And then the Typer tool that I'm working on is to just get them typing as fast as possible. Is version 2.0. Has anyone heard of Svelte? Not heard of Svelte? Svelte.js. Okay. React, Angular, Vue. Those ring a bell? Like those are a thing that. So React, Angular, and Vue are front-end frameworks that are component libraries with varying degrees of complexity. Right? React on one spectrum is just a bare bones component library that gives you very little functionality out of the box. You got to bring your own everything, your own router, your own state management, all that good stuff. Angular on the other end of the spectrum is batteries included. It comes with its own routing, it comes with its own state management, it comes with services and all sorts of other stuff. Vue sits right in the middle where some things are brought for you. There's first party routers, there's first party store state management, things like that. But it's a spectrum, right? React is bring your own everything. Angular is do everything our way. And Vue is right in the middle where it brings some obscure stuff, but we were going to help you out along the way. These are best practices. Svelte is in this world, right? And when I say Svelte is in this world, I mean more of the sense that it is a component library, like it's a component tool. It tries to do as little as possible for you in the ways of doing things, in the sense that you're writing just vanilla JavaScript. You run it through its compiler, and it'll create the code necessary to be a reactive framework for you. When I say reactive, is everyone on the same page with that? Reactive? So reactive is I do something, I press a button, and something happens right away. So if I'm like typing in the input field and I see the data show up down below, that's reactive, like two-way data binding in that sense. Trying to get that to do that in vanilla JavaScript, there's a bunch of boilerplate framework, and making it work across browser has been historically difficult, hence these frameworks, right? Svelte is a component library, meaning I can create a small little thing that can be consumed by a bigger thing, and that small little thing that is responsible for only knowing about that. And then there's a parent-child relationship. And if you're familiar with React, Angular, Vue, these concepts translate one-to-one, right? They're not reinventing anything. What they're reinventing is what it means to be reactive. Angular does a dirty checking, like under the hood, meaning it runs multiple checks on a virtual DOM over and over and over and over again, and checks to see if something's changed, and then updates the HTML if something has changed. React, on the other hand, is the, and this is a quote, the least reactive thing out there. Anyone heard of virtual DOM? Everybody know what the DOM is? Document Object Model. It's your HTML. It's the representation of your JavaScript, of your HTML. The virtual DOM is just an object that represents the data on your screen. React takes a virtual DOM snapshot of what your HTML looks like, and when you're changing something in the virtual DOM. And it goes through every key in the object, no matter how deep that object is, and says, is this the same thing as it was before? Yes, don't render it. Is this the same thing as it was before? Yes, don't render it. Is something in here that changed? Yes, okay, that changed, let me go re-render that. So if your tree is complex, your HTML, it's going through a lot of these checks over and over and over again. Vue takes a little slightly different approach by utilizing a template, right? So in the React world, you have the JSX, where you're writing HTML inside of the JavaScript, and it's creating that virtual tree, and that's why it has to do everything else. It doesn't know what's static and what's dynamic. Where Vue takes a slightly different approach, still uses the virtual DOM, but being that it's written in the HTML, it can make smart assumptions about what is static, meaning not changing, and what's dynamic, meaning something might change in the future, right? So its diff checking is similar to React, except it makes smarter decisions about where to look and what to change. All of that is super in the weeds and complex, what's going on under the hood there. And so when I'm making my decision about creating this tool, I was looking at all these different factors because I want something easy for me to maintain, easy for other contributors to maintain to this project, and easy for the kids to use, right? The whole point of this is to teach kids how to type, right? I got to hold shift and hit comma to get that carrot out there. So I originally wrote this tool, the Cosmic Typer, in vanilla JavaScript. And I had to do a lot of, I don't want to say hacky things, but I had to do a lot of things in the JavaScript land that I didn't like to do. My HTML wasn't separated, my CSS wasn't as separated as I wanted it to be. So Svelte is a new up-and-comer. It just hit version 3, mid last year, and it's been getting a lot of attention. And so as I was looking at it, I was like, that's cool. I heard about it, I read about it, I don't care. It's not going to solve anything in my life. And then I looked at its tutorials, right? So if you go to svelte.dev, there's a tutorial section. It'll walk through just the basic concepts of its documentation, which it does very well, by the way. One of the best I've seen out there. And the example it gave me of how to listen for a key down and show on the screen what key the user had pressed was exactly what I needed to do to get that out there. So I took the time to figure it out, that one example, and within 2 hours of not knowing Svelte at all to reading that one tutorial, I was able to completely recreate the experience for the user. Let me start off by explaining what Typer is. So this is a tool we use at Code Palm Beach when we host our events for our students. Again, Code Palm Beach is a nonprofit organization dedicated to teaching kids to code. We host multiple events throughout the month in different locations. Science Center up in Jupiter, we expanded to Boca, and we're out in Royal Palm in the acreage area, and we want to go everywhere in Palm Beach County. This is the first tool. When I greet a student coming into Code Palm Beach, I ask them, have they done anything before? What's their proficient level? Have they done one thing? Have they done an hour of code? Have they built their own website? Typically speaking, they've seen hour of code, right? They've done that at school and they're slightly interested in it, but they're all struggling with typing. So this lesson here gives them a little explanation of what's happening, gives them an HTML snippet on the screen, and as I type, if I type the wrong thing, gives them a little indication that something's happening. So one of the things that I wanted to enforce was the positive reinforcement, right? Highlight it green if you get it correct. You're seeing the progression that you do. And then also, the added bonus, this was a happy side effect. When I take the HTML out of that string there and just place it on the screen, it renders it. So there's a mini lesson in here. This is what an H1 looks like. When I hit next, this is what an H2 looks like. But the problem with this is there's a lot to be desired here, right? When we got into more complex lessons for the students, like trying to teach them what Flexbox was or CSS Grid, we kept having to rewrite the parent container class over and over and over again just to change one attribute on there. So the problems I was running into is on the smaller screens, if my text got really, really long, the wrapping made it weird and the line wouldn't continue for some reason, like for the user to type it. And then it didn't support multi-line. So if I wanted to write an element that had a background color, a font size, and the text color and all that stuff, I wouldn't write that one line at a time referring to the class over and over and over again. I would write the class name, curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets, color equal or colon white, font size colon 30 pixels, etc. I would do it in multiple lines, right? I couldn't do that very easily in this version. This is all vanilla JavaScript, nothing special about it. So by looking at Svelte, their examples, again, highly recommend checking this out. The main event that I'm listening for on here is the key down event. Where are we at? SVG actions. Svelte elements. When I got to the Svelte elements, so I'm pressing on the screen, the keyboard, and it's showing what I need on here. And the key that threw this out was this line right here. So after I saw that, I took the logic from my vanilla JavaScript, downloaded the boilerplate, got this going with this example, and went off to the races. So there's a CLI tool that Svelte recommends you download a copy of their tool. Again, this is all in the documentation, so I don't want to go too into depth with that. I've enhanced what they have there because I'm a big fan of utilizing the CSS SAS preprocessor, as I have my own naming conventions and my mix-ins and variables and things like that. And then outside the box, they don't give you very much structure. If I were to put that on the spectrum where React is bring your own everything and Angular is do everything our way, I would kind of put Svelte in between Vue and React, where there's some stuff in here that it does for you, but you have to figure out like what structure you want. Like the fact that I have a components folder, a scripts, and a stores, all that stuff is just made up by me, whereas Angular has a definitive, put these things in this folder, name these things, and things will kind of fall into place. Svelte doesn't have anything like that. A little bit more background on Svelte. The reason why this was created is because all of those other things are way too heavy. The creator of this project is a investigative journalist. He works on the New York Times team for investigative journalism, and he has to create visuals and animations that relate to the articles that are being written. Do you guys remember when Notre Dame caught on fire? There was a visual that went along with the New York Times thing. As you scrolled down, it showed you the different aspects of Notre Dame, where it caught on fire, and what was damaged and what wasn't, and all sorts of stuff like that. Anybody remember seeing that New York Times article?
No.
Yeah, that was built in that. It was pretty cool. But the whole point of that is it's a standalone single file thing. It compiles the framework out of there, and it loads it up into their WordPress. Right? So the HTML and CSS that are and JavaScript that are necessary are packaged in one little bundle that sends it up there. So it didn't need to bring in a library like Vue or React. If it didn't use the animations, it doesn't compile. If it didn't use the stores, the state management, it didn't compile it. So it's using all of the standard ES6 features that compile things away from that. The beauty of Svelte. Is anyone not familiar with ES6? Is this code unreadable? Just off the bat, what is this doing?
Looks like TypeScript. I'm surprised.
Just ES6. I've got a bunch of components, little smaller JavaScript files all over the place. Make it easier for people to read. Is that better?
Ooh. But the animation is back and forth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the extension they have there is .svelte, but this is really just for the compiler to read the file and do something special with it. All it is just an HTML extension. I have my script tag, I have my style tag, and then I've got my regular HTML. That's all a Svelte file is, and the Svelte is just a little bit of sprinkling of framework on top of that to do a little bit more dynamic things. Looking at the HTML, has anyone not seen this syntax before? This is familiar from Angular land. Vue land. Vue has a very similar version of this.
But the ancestor of this, where this came from, is handlebars, mustache and handlebars, right? Where we have the curly brackets, we have some condition in there, some JavaScript to render, and then the HTML will be output in there. So the history for me, I've used handlebars in the past when I'm trying to do all these dynamic web apps before all these things came out. This fell right in line with what I was trying to accomplish. So the other thing about this is like, I think of this, and I'm utilizing this now for nothing more than a component creator, like a library creator. Because this app state is something I just completely made up. This welcome screen is something I made up. In all of the frameworks, we have a parent-child relationship. My parent app right now is this app.svelte. The child is the welcome screen. How does my child get information to from the parent? Well, we have data binding, just like every other framework. So if you're familiar with any of the top three, the exact same concepts apply here. The syntax is just slightly different because it's very ES6 centric, whereas Angular, React, and Vue have what do they call them, props in React and Vue. In Angular, they call them inputs, right? Nomenclature, they mean exactly the same thing. It just names them differently, right? So if you notice too, so I have welcome screen here on line 47 and on line 51. We have lesson screen. If we look at the import, again, just regular ES6 syntax of I've got a file that does something, I need access to that, I'm outputting it here. So I thought that was pretty neat. We have to put the .svelte, because a lot of times if you don't put the .ts or .js file in there, the interpreter knows what you're talking about. I tried that and it didn't work. So put the .svelte if you're utilizing it. So if we continue down this structure, I've put everything in their own little components folder that match with what's going on. So if we look at the code GUID, so let me run you through the new app real quick to give you a little bit more light of what's going on here. npm run dev. This is running on Rollup, which the creator of Svelte was the creator of Rollup as well. Do you guys know what Webpack is? Rollup is that, just a different version of it, right? So Rollup, Gulp, Webpack, just task runners, compilers, bundlers, things of that nature, right? Rollup was created by Rich Harris. Rich Harris also created Svelte. So this is the new typer. A couple of the enhancements that I wanted to take with this is I wanted to gather some information about any particular student along their journey, because for the more advanced students, I wanted to send them to a different website than the beginner students. And by asking intro questions will help me put a timer on how long they've been on here. And when they're done, the beginner class goes to free code camp, and then the other half, the more advanced class, goes to like code combat or something like that. So it's like being able to ask these questions was super important that I was missing from the initial conversation, other than me directly talking to the student. So this is a way for the student to kind of get started on their own, so that way they don't necessarily have to be in our class to get a similar experience, right? This grandiose idea is to be Sans volunteer, Sans mentor, if you want to use this and you can't come to our events. So I'm asking a question right now, HTML, CSS. I want to expand this to be just general typing. You know, how fast can you type regular, language? And then we have a difficulty setting. Is it, you want to take it easy, or do you want to do it to a challenge? Once we select those settings, we see what the lessons are. There's stuff going on under the hood that I want to further enhance this, create some local storage to know which ones you've completed and which ones you haven't, so that way if you accidentally go away and come back, you start back on there. The other enhancement is line breaks, which we'll see in a second, and a mini map. One of the biggest, I don't want to say complaints, but misunderstandings that I got from my students is they didn't visualize what they were typing in the original version versus what it would actually be like in the document. So this would actually be in the document, right? So this works exactly the same way.
What do you mean? You were seeing that. We were seeing it. Oh.
You see it? You see it now?
At the bottom, yes.
All right, so I have my CSS. So like if the HTML, this would eventually be your HTML document, and this would eventually be your CSS document. So we're seeing how these two things start to play to each other. I still haven't connected them for them, but this particular tool isn't necessarily that, what is a file system and how do these things connect? This is, what is syntax, right? Like we're dealing with 6th graders, 7th graders, maybe some 5th graders, and if they've gotten into the greater than less than part of that, I never remember which side is, eats the other half, so I just say open caret and close caret, and they get me. Less than, greater than, I always get that wrong. But they don't see that. A lot of them will hit shift and then comma, but that's not what you need to do. You need to hold it and go on. So the reason behind this is to get them not using one finger at a time, use their pinkies, use their thumbs, figure out how to get what's going on down here. The structure of this is pretty straightforward. By straightforward, I mean, since I created it, I understand what's going on. So one of my goals behind this was to make this as readable as possible. So I worked really hard on creating variable names and function names that made sense for what they do. If I was doing complex logic in like an if condition, I abstracted it out to a function and gave it a name, right? So if we look at handle key down, is modifier is a function name. If I go down to is modifier, I've got an array of modifier key, and if that is in there, so if I hit the shift key, it gives me the type is shift, and if that's in the moderator, I know to just move on with life right here. Overall, what's happening in here is I have an array of information. Let me look at my data real quick. This is my array of information. I take each individual character and I split it. The reason I split it on character, now I have an array of individual characters, I want to wrap them around the span tag. The reason I want to wrap them around the span tag is because that's what I want to check on. I'm looking at the index that the user is on, so index 0 to start with. What is that character in that span tag? If they press a key, what key is that? Is that the same character in the span tag? If it is, highlight it, move on to the next index. If it isn't right, flash a little bit of red. So that way they know they hit the wrong key. If there's a combination, the modifier comes in, if I need to hit the caret, is I don't want to trigger the wrong error flash if they're hitting a modifier key. That's why I have that function in there. And this is all originally was inside my JavaScript. And if it's inside my JavaScript with the template literals, I lose all of the syntax highlighting, IntelliSense, all that good stuff. Oh, yeah. So Svelte for me was taking that out of the JavaScript and putting it back in the HTML. A couple of cool things that Svelte makes super easy. In Angular, React, and Vue, there's a condition for adding the class or removing the class based on the condition being true or false, right? Mm-hmm. This is how you do that in Svelte land. Class colon, I want to add complete row if this condition renders true. Yes. I want to add current row if this condition equals true. So the visualization that's going behind that is, with the characters, I'm adding complete, correct, and cursor based on the information that's going on there. So the cursor, what information am I on? Correct, H3 class. So based on the indexes and current character that we're on, changing and updating, Svelte is changing everything on the fly for me. So this is using a combination of a handlebar-like syntax, and all of my JavaScript lives inside of this function here, or this script tag here. So if I wanted to as well, scoping your CSS, is done by default. If I add a script tag, style tag down here, it's automatically scoped to this component. It does not bleed into the children, and does not bleed up and affect the parent as well. I personally don't like that because I write BEM classes on my components in the first place. I want my SAS file separated, but it is super doable and easy and out of the box to do over here, whereas in all of the other languages or frameworks, you have to say this is scoped CSS explicitly, either in a config setting or on the script tag, the style tag right above it. Svelte done by default. You don't have to worry about that. So there's a lot of decisions that Svelte has made that encapsulate some of those bigger, like, you don't waste your time thinking about that because it's going to work the way you expect it and the way you want it to. Everyone's spent enough time thinking about it that it's pointless to configure over and over and over again unless you want to opt out of it type scenario. And me using the SAS file in a separate styles folder is me opting out of that single file thing. I'm doing a lot of talking. Anybody have any general questions about what I'm talking about? Super confused? Got it? What's up?
Hey Jeremy, what is the result of the compile? Like, let's say I'm done writing my code, and I guess I'm going to use the CLI to, I don't know, run some command that compiles it, and is it just one index.html file and one JS? Pretty much.
Yep. So bundle my CSS file and a bundle .js. There are things that I could do to code split if I cared about that. But in this version, it's such a small application that sending it all over at once is fine for me. The code splitting comes into play with the import items up here. There are two different run develop, which is what I'm running now, which will give you everything regardless if you need it or not, and run build, which will strip down and give you a much smaller footprint and compress and all that good stuff.
That's a good point. It's always that at the very end, it can only be JavaScript, right? No matter what it is.
Yep.
That's the only thing the browser knows.
Yep. So this is
supported by all the browsers.
Back to 11, I believe. Yeah.
Okay.
IE 11.
Yes. I11. Because it just because you're utilizing Babel under the hood to compile
Right.
down to the lowest common denominator. Yeah, it's in. I don't understand rollup well enough to kind of like point it out. Yeah, it's in here somewhere. This svelte.config file is me bypassing the default and adding SAS to the system versus using the defaults from there. But it's somewhere in the rollup file.
Nice.
Any other questions so far?
What did you choose, Sal, to rewrite Typer?
So I tried to do this in React and Vue, and I kept two problems I was running into. There was no way to focus on the text I cared about.
Yes.
To have the students start typing, and the every time I was inadvertently creating a memory leak by reassigning add event listener on the window for key down.
Each time.
And I don't know why that was happening, because I was doing what the documents were telling me, like on create
Right.
window.add event listener key down, but the component kept getting recreated and I didn't understand why. So like even just adding the destroy to remove the event listener, that got real hairy, because if I added and then removed the event listener, it didn't remember the path I was on. And trying to abstract that out to Vuex, like just got hairy, and I was like, you know what, I'm 90% done with the vanilla version. I want to get that out there. But then as I started thinking of new features, like the mini map, asking the questions for the individuals to go down a certain path, all those things, like I needed a little bit of framework on top of that, because I didn't want to create that all myself, right? So the reactivity on here is not super groundbreaking for what I'm doing, because I could just listen to the DOM and put it on there and update the class necessary. But reading the DOM with a event listener, like a document.query selector, that gets expensive the more complex my lesson gets. So all the span tags will add up if I've got multiple lines in there, right? Because once I get to CSS, I could have 10 lines for one div, and all the span tags in there. Like, it was more of a perceived performance issue than an actual one, and Svelte seemed cool.
Cool.
So, if you guys haven't used it, I encourage you to play around with it because it's super fun, right? The question I get asked a lot is, would I replace Vue with Svelte? The answer is no, all the time, right? Vue for me is bigger project, bigger scope. I want 20 people contributing to this code base, and there's a lot more complexity going on typically in my Vue apps and what I've dealt with stuff in Vue has been super simple. Now that I've separated the components, I can have multiple contributors on there and whatnot. But I don't think this would be ready for corporate world just yet. There's no TypeScript support, at least full TypeScript support. So that's a big thing that corporate America really cares about. Does anyone not know what TypeScript is? TypeScript is a superset of JavaScript that adds additional functionality, like types, interfaces, enums, things of that nature that help compile time errors. Compile time is when I hit save and it takes my code I wrote and produces into JavaScript that the browser can read. That's compilation time. JavaScript currently doesn't have any error checking at that process. You have to wait till you view it in the browser before you can check to see what happened.
And get to that section of the code before you can see what's
Exactly, right? So there's a lot of steps you have to go and get from there. Svelte is pretty good at the compilation error stuff too. Rich Harris, being that he works for New York Times, the major driving factor is to be as low powered as possible, right? Because New York Times is read on low powered devices all over the world, so he can't ship Angular, right? On a sub 3G network, on a sub Galaxy S8 phone, right? The processing power isn't there, the network speeds aren't there, so he's got to fit as much through the pipeline as possible. So the other reason for creating Svelte was to reduce the footprint of the framework itself. And if you look at the output code, it's adding some stuff that I didn't write in there, but the amount of code that it's sending over the wire is significantly less than all three of them combined, right? Angular, to just get hello world working in Angular, you're talking at least 100 kilobytes of code. React and Vue in the 60 to 80 kilobytes, bare minimum. The frameworks are working their way out of that. Vue 3 is working to the composition API, and that's going to be a lot more tree shakeable, meaning features you don't use aren't going to be shipped with it. React is going down that path with, I think the work behind hooks is the start of that foundation, and Angular 9, they've got a new rendering engine called Ivy, and that's one of the driving factors is to only compile what you need, so that way what you're shipping over the wire is significantly smaller than the monolithic app. If you're not using everything, why ship it, is the mantra, right? Any other questions? Routing? No. So in Svelte, by default, routing is a beast. It's not built in. There is a companion project called Sapper that is the equivalent to Gatsby in React, right? Equivalent to Gridsome in Vue, right?
No.
So Gatsby and Gridsome are frameworks built on top of the libraries to help make things a little bit easier for you. Dynamic routing, route protection, convention over configuration. In Gridsome, you create a pages folder, you put a Vue component in there, that is now a page, right? You don't have to configure the route to do that, the route file to do that. Gritson just handles that for you, right? Gatsby in a very similar boat in that context. So its equivalent in Svelte world is Sapper. I tried doing routing, and it's pretty straightforward. The problem with the routing that I found is there was no caching. If I were refresh the browser, it would break in weird ways that Vue router or React router just didn't break in. And so without using Sapper or anything of that nature, there is, but I don't recommend it. It wasn't a pleasant experience.
Yeah. You mentioned several times that these things are more for. This is not meant to be diminishing component, like a section of a web page, as opposed to the complete.
Yeah.
You know, Facebook recreation.
Exactly, and I think that's the whole point of this. What he just stated was that this is supposed to be a section of the website. What drew me to Vue in the first place was the prospect of taking out jQuery, putting the Vue CDN, and start making things, because I was building a bunch of brochure websites that didn't need the full SPA treatment. I just needed a thing to be reactive. Yeah, I could do it in jQuery, but Vue just made it a lot easier. Svelte takes that idea a little bit further, where it's still a single page that you're building, like in the context of, you know, like a brochure website, but it's a little bit more powerful. You have to go through that build pipeline, whereas Vue, you don't have to go through that build pipeline to start with. There is a build pipeline, you just don't have to. Svelte, you need to. But at the end of the day, it's outputting this HTML file, which I can then inject into my WordPress.com website or something, into my content management of choice. And that's the driving factor behind it, because I believe New York Times is a WordPress website. And
really?
if he's, yeah.
That's amazing.
Well, Forbes is too.
Really?
Whoever works there. Yeah, it's the Angular front end, but the back end's all.
Spectacular.
Yeah. It's a heavily customized, you can imagine.
Oh, of course, of course. No, but it's really impressive.
Yeah.
Been doing WordPress. I don't know if you guys have done the same thing, but I've been doing it. I don't know. Not been doing it. We've been part of the groups and all that for the last 15 years or something like that. I even made a presentation how to install it, and yet it still impresses me that it's absolutely everywhere.
It's still growing. What are we?
33% of the web.
Oh my God.
33% of the web,
That's
not like
amazing.
of CMSs,
Yeah.
of the web.
Well, that might be higher than jQuery.
Dude, every time we taught this at Code Palm Beach, I had to update my slides, because when I was teaching at Code Palm Beach, no, Palm Beach Code School, I had way too many things with Palm Beach and code in there. It is ridiculous.
I never remember, is it Code Palm Beach or Palm Beach Code?
Yeah. Code Palm Beach Tech JS.
I don't remember. We were teaching together at a code school, and I taught the WordPress, and every time I had to teach the WordPress, I had to update the slides, because it started off at 25%. 6 months later, it was 26%. 6 months later, it was 27%. And I just said plus 25+%, because it kept.
That's just happened to us last
Yeah.
week, because I was like, oh, it's like 25%. You're like, it's 35% now. Like, what? I was like, this is like 4 years ago we just
Of the web.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
I want that to sink in. Of the web. There's a billion trillion websites out there. 33% of that's WordPress.
Most of them are hacked WordPress websites.
All right, so to wrap things up, Svelte is the bee's knees, in my opinion. I really enjoyed learning this, and comparatively to Angular, React, Vue, Svelte, hated, don't care for, loved it, right? Vue and Svelte, I can't get enough of both of them, right? The types of projects I would build with Vue versus Svelte are radically different, and there's no clear line as like I would do this versus that. It's more about the scale for me. Like, what's the complexity of this thing? Do I need a bunch of people working on this? Do I need TypeScript support? Things of that nature would help me differentiate between the two, and job market too, right? Svelte was an easy choice for me to choose for the typer, because it's me mainly. I've got a couple of contributors on GitHub, but they're mainly contributing lessons while I'm building the framework. Having said that, github.com/Jernbo. I've got the two repositories right here, Cosmic Checker and Cosmic Typer. Checker is my free code camp locally, right? I say free code camp because it's essentially lesson on the left, you write in the editor, you come to refresh the page, the stuff you've done is checked out, right? So step 1, you have 4 tasks. Step 2, you have 8 tasks. Whatever the case may be to build the thing on the right. And this is what we use in our courses. So Code Palm Beach has 2 types of courses. We have the free Anybody Come class, and that happens every Saturday in random spots. If you guys are looking to volunteer and give back to the community, I cannot suggest this enough. It is very rewarding. The kids really enjoyed this, and this reinforces my knowledge as well. Like if I have to explain it to somebody who has 0 basis starting, I have to figure out how to explain that to them, and I highly encourage even beginners.
Yeah,
if all you know is HTML, that's a great place to start because they don't even know that, right? So I highly encourage you to do that. How do you do that, you say?
Ooh.
Oops, codepalmbeach.org. Click that volunteer button and start the process. It's a simple form. Being that we're dealing with minors, everybody goes through a background check. It's just a formality. And we'll get you'll be a part of our newsletter, and we have Eventbrite. You sign up, you'll be a part of our Slack channel for Palm Beach volunteers. You'll be notified via that or an email if you choose so. And you choose the rate you want to give back, right? If you want to go to every month, cool. If you only do once a quarter, that's absolutely fine as well. Like I said, we're all the way down from Delray, Boca area, up to Jupiter. And we're looking to expand further west than Royal Palm. Like we want to be out in Wellington, Pahokee. We want to be, everywhere, right?
Yeah, like I said, it's real low key too. It's not like you're like standing in front of people or anything. So if you have like a stage fright or anything like that, don't worry about it. But it's the kids really appreciate it. So if you're looking for a way to like just give back to the community in general, then it's definitely you could do worse.
Yeah, I should introduce Greg and Damien. They helped me run the paid course for Code Palm Beach, which is a more in-depth where we're using all of our tools and we're guiding them through. We've got a series of slides that we, teach them like I would teach at Palm Beach Code School. That was hard for me to say. Look at them because it's like I want to introduce them to the topic. We're building in class. We build 2 websites, but we give them homework where they have extra websites that they can build, and the idea is to get them with enough foundation that they can hit the ground running after they're done with our course. And we go through HTML and CSS, so they're all proficient by the end of the course. If you don't want to give back by teaching and mentoring young individuals, I've got issues on both of these projects.
Oh, I thought
that
you
if
just
you
had
want
it.
to,
Well, you're gonna say after you
I
shift
know.
it.
I
Oh,
got
man.
issues with you. It's not cool.
Yeah, not cool.
GitHub issues.
Oh,
If you want to check them out, I flagged them as help wanted. If it's a good
fantastic.
first, if you're not familiar with the whole open source process, I've tried to flag them as like good for beginners or what they're trying, like if they're just a lesson, that's another indication that's a good for beginners type scenario and whatnot. So there's multiple ways to give back. I would appreciate the help on the code side, and I know the kids would appreciate the help just being there and explaining some of the concepts to them. So that's my talk for today. Use Svelte or Vue, nothing else.
nothing else.
Get out.
Svelte, Vue, get out.
Get the no. ET.
So I want to end tonight with 2 more topics. One, does anybody not know where we're at? I usually got to give a plug to where we're at. The building we're in is 1909. This is formerly the tech space, the Palm Beach tech space. If you're familiar with that, because I see some people who haven't been around for a while, but back in the beginning. The tech space is no more. They are now 1909. The Palm Beach Tech Association is still a thing, but the co-working space is what we're sitting in today. If you are a freelancer or you work remote from home and you want to get out of your home office, you can rent a desk where these people are sitting, just a chair. You can rent a dedicated desk, which got the monitors behind it, or you can rent a dedicated office, right? weare1909.com is the website you want to go to check all that stuff out. This is our home. New home again, old home.
Oh, wow.
We were in other places. You guys might have been down to that
Cafe.
Bitcoin cafe. They're not a cafe anymore.
What happened?
There's a new cafe going in there.
No.
We have bets that it'll last 6 months.
Oh,
Wait,
Anybody want in on
this
this?
one's a Ripple Cafe.
oh yes.
So we were trying to find new homes, and the Bitcoin cafe that was originally going to be our home last year.
It's
We
gone?
spent about 6 months there. Yeah, they're no longer there. So we're back here. This is our new old permanent home again. If you're interested in renting a desk, reach out to me. I can point you to We Are 1909, and they will get that ball rolling.
And it's very cheap.
Very. Yeah, I mean, renting a desk here, I think is like $50
Yeah.
a month, and that gets you like business hour access to these things, get you on their newsletters for different types of events and all that good stuff,
Free coffee, free Wi-Fi.
all that good
No
stuff.
one's going to steal your laptop when you go to the bathroom.
And the last thing I like to end on is these events are for you guys, right? The whole reason I started Palm Beach JavaScript is because I wanted to nerd out and talk about JavaScript with fellow like-minded people. I thought I was in a technology desert. It's about what I cared about. And when I created this 5 years ago now, would you guys believe that? Holy shit. 5 years ago, created this, and I found out there's a bunch of people here. So if you have anything that you're learning, Svelte, I am not an expert in. I just started this 3 months ago, maybe like October-ish, and I'm out here teaching it. The philosophy I live my life by is if I really want to learn something, I try to teach it. Because if I can't explain something to you, then I don't know it myself, and that drives me to go do better, right? And being that, I'm teaching the kids, I should know what I'm talking about. But regardless, if you wanted another way to give back is to come give a talk, right? It could be about anything you want. The reason I kept it, one of the original names was going to be Node.js and Meteor.js, because those were the things I was focused on when I first started this. And I thought better of that because I didn't want to limit myself to those two technologies. This is anything and everything JavaScript related. If you're into testing, if you're into robotics, if you're into API creation, if you're into Svelte, front-end frameworks, doesn't matter what you're into. If you're currently learning something, I highly encourage you to reach out to either myself or Damien to book a spot to come talk. And again, you don't have to be an expert to give a talk because not only does it reinforce your knowledge of the subject you're learning, but you might help somebody who's struggling with the same thing that they're too afraid to ask the question on, right? One of the earliest gratifications I got that I was doing the right thing is I was talking about Meteor, and I was struggling with this one thing in particular, and I talked about it, and that was my entire talk about that one thing I was struggling with, and 3 people came up to me afterwards and be like, I'm struggling with that same thing right now. So I helped unblock somebody from the future pain that they were about ready to get into because I went through that, and I definitely appreciate that when I hear somebody point that out, and I'm about ready to walk the coals on that. So it's a great way to give back to the community. If Code Palm Beach isn't your thing, consider talking here. Again, reach out to Damien Montero or myself, Jumbo. Palm Beach Tech Slack channel. Is everybody on it yet? Sorry, there's the last thing before I kick you guys out. Palm Beach Tech Slack channel. Go to palmbeachtech.org. There's a Slack button. Sign up for Slack. Follow us in the developers channel. There is banter going on there all day, every day. Usually weird gifts by Damien, but there's a lot of good content going on. If you're stuck on something, throw it out there. I guarantee there's an expert or somebody who just went through that that's willing to help out. It happens all the time.
Absolutely, you're going to get always an answer there. There's never nothing passes by.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and you have answers you can always give them.
Or opinions.
Yes.
I like opinions.
Cool.
Why you're wrong about not liking Svelte. All right, thanks guys. Appreciate everybody coming out.
Peace. Oh, what's the Wi-Fi password for the 1900? Do you know?
Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi? Do we have Wi-Fi signed anywhere? Anybody know the Wi-Fi password 1909?
Forgot.